I've heard talk about the CWA opening themselves up to have men as associate members.
Yes.
Rosa, controversial, I've
very
heard.
controversial, and
What-
I don't want to get into all of that.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today, the Noongar Wadandi Mort. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging.
Scratch the surface and everyone has a story. Welcome, Kaya, to the wisdom of women.
Our podcast is very much centred around knowledge and women supporting women. And our guest today comes from an organisation that has been doing just that for 100 years.
Welcome, Rosa Tognella.
Okay.
And it's a birthday, a big birthday celebration for the Amazing Country Women's Association. You must be very proud.
Very, very proud to belong to such an organisation. They're 100 years this year, and they started in 1924. And today we've got a membership of approximately just over 2,000 women in 184 branches. Years ago it was a lot bigger because the need was a lot more for the women in the rural areas than what it is today.
Yeah, there's such a great background and story about all of the facets of Country Women's Association and what it brings to regional areas. But let's talk a little bit about your story. You're a country girl by heart, aren't you?
Yes, I was born in Waroona quite some time ago.
Now, for those who don't know, Waroona, of course, is nestled in the beautiful southwest of Western Australia. Gorgeous spot.
Yeah.
You were lucky.
Very lucky. And I went to school. I was born there. I went to school there. I was married there. I had all my children in Waroona. And we were very, very comfortable on a dairy farm. And then
Dairy farm's a tough life.
it's not easy.
Isn't it? Yeah. No rest for you.
7 days a week. And
Yeah.
of course we had irrigation as well. And that was hard work. Not for me, but for my husband.
What do you mean by that? Irrigation as well?
Well, the irrigation is to water the paddocks.
Yeah. So you've got to rotate and
Move all the pipes
keep
around.
them on and, yeah.
Well, no, we never had pipes. We had channels.
Ah.
Yeah, so you had to make sure all the channels were very clean.
Oh.
And there was no kikuyu in the channons.
That sounds
that
like harder
gra-
work than moving a pipe.
That grass, we all know how tough kikuyu is.
And
hey?
that wasn't easy. But my husband, what he did too, he was moving grass off the channels because it was all kikuyu, and he was bitten by a snake that was in the channel. So that was a bit traumatic.
Oh, God.
But anyway, he got over that, but he was very sick for about 3 months.
Wow.
That's a farmer's... Oh, he got over it.
Yeah.
Yeah, after he got over it.
I love
What
that.
happened after he got bitten? Was he yelling from the channel?
Well,
or what happened?
fortunately, my other son was with him, or one of my sons were with him, and he put him on the back of the bike and came up to the house and said he'd been bitten by a snake. And, of course, I didn't panic because I don't panic. And what I did, I rang our doctor and he said, do you want me to come out to the farm or do you want to come to the hospital? And I chose to go to the hospital and hopped in the car, and I had no fuel in the car.
Oh, no.
So I had to fill up the car with fuel first, and then we went off to the hospital. But by the time we got to the hospital, John was really yellow, and he was like that for about 3 months. But they gave him an antivenom, and that helped.
What snake was it? Yeah.
We don't know because it was in the irrigation channel.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
So this is the life and times on a farm.
Well, you've got
Hey?
challenges all the time, haven't you, on a farm?
Wow. Yeah. So you're happy along on the farm, and tell us about your introduction to the CWA. What happened?
Well, what happened was my mother-in-law was very involved with CWA, and then she developed arthritis and she was in a wheelchair. So there wasn't a lot she could do. And my father-in-law used to take her to CWA each month. Anyway, this particular month, he asked me if I'd take her. And I thought, yeah, not a problem, so I took her. And we arrived there and all the women were dressed up, and as they did in those days, because this is just over 40 years ago. I've been a member for about 42 years. Oh, nice. So we arrived at the meeting and all the women were dressed up, and I just had jeans and a T-shirt and probably thongs because I just thought I was dropping my mother-in-law off. and going back to pick her up. Anyway, she said to me when we arrived, she said, "You're not going to stay?" And I looked around and I thought, well, there's no reason why I can't stay. So I did stay, and she was really delighted that I was staying. And by the end of the afternoon, it was the AGM, which I didn't know, and she'd paid my membership.
She knew what she was doing. That's amazing.
And I think my father-in-law knew too.
Yeah, yeah.
So you'd known about the CWA though
Yes,
prior
I knew
to that?
because, I did.
And what did you think of it at that age that you were?
Well, at the time, I didn't put a lot of thought into it because I had 3 small children. And at that age, the children were all needing me to be at kindy and schools and all that sort of things. So I had no intentions of being at CWA. And each month, my mother-in-law would ring me and say, "Don't forget, we've got CWA tomorrow." And I'd think, "Oh, gee, I don't want to go," but I went. And then I got to learn what they were all about. And I thought it's a wonderful organisation. So I enjoyed my 42 years.
So tell us about the aspects that you did enjoy when you say you learnt what it was about. What was it about?
It was about helping rural women at the time because the rural women were having all sorts of problems, very lonely. They didn't have what we have today, and sort of working towards their needs. It was very, very encouraging and also very gratifying to know that we were doing something for these women in the rural areas. But it's not only for rural women, because we have a lot of women in the city, and most of them are probably from the rural areas that have retired to the city. But they had needs as well.
So the children started to get a little more independent and you found that you didn't have to be with them so much. So your role with the CWA gradually over a period of time increased quite substantially, didn't
Well,
it?
it did, After I was there for 12 months, I thought, if I'm going to be here, I'm not just going to sit at a meeting. I'm going to be involved. So then I became secretary, I think it was.
That says something about Rose's personality. All right, I'm here. I'm taking charge. What's going on?
Yes, I became secretary, and then we were only in Brunswick for a very short time after that because Alcoa came into the district. So we sold the dairy and moved to Brunswick. And for the first 12 months in Brunswick, I didn't join CWA in Brunswick. I just took a break from it. And then I thought, I was approached if I'd go to CWA. So I went, and I thought, well, same thing again. If I'm going to be here, I may as well be involved in some organisation in the town. So I got involved with CWA. And then I think I became secretary again. And then later president. And then after I was there for a few years, not too many years, they have a division, the state's divided into different areas. And at that time, it was divided into 25 areas. So I was approached to be divisional president, and I thought, no, I can't do this, because my whole life's been a challenge. I always say, yes, I'll do it, I'll help you. And then I sit back and I think, this is a challenge, how am I going to cope with this? But I do. So I became divisional president, and then after a bit of coaching.
That's amazing. Well done.
And then that meant I was on state council for 3 years. You had to be on state council if you were a divisional president. And my area was from Brunswick through to Margaret River and Dunsborough, past Margaret River. What's that town past Margaret River?
Oh,
Augusta.
Augusta.
there we go.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Augusta. So it was a very big area, but I
It
really
is.
enjoyed it, yeah.
So how much time were you taking up?
Not a lot of time at that time, but it wasn't until I became State International Officer later,
Oh,
and that was a big
wait,
job.
there's more.
Yeah. So, and I enjoyed being State International Officer.
Wow.
That was really great.
What does that entail?
Well, that was entailing keeping Western Australia informed of our international body, which is the Associated Country Women of the World. Mm-hmm. And
God.
yeah, and they've got something like they're in 70 different countries, and they've got about 9 million members at the time. And that was really, and I really enjoyed that. And I worked with Father Brian Morrison in Western Australia. What happened was they had that radiation disaster in Chernobyl. And we were knitting a lot of warm clothes to send to the children in Chernobyl. And that was really good. So we really enjoyed doing all that. And we started that off in Western Australia before not too long. It became national. And everywhere I went, I had a boot full of warm clothes for the children of Chernobyl. But working with Brian Morrison, Father Brian Morrison at the time, he was very good. He kept going overseas to Chernobyl. So we'd send all our stuff with him and he would take it all to them.
Amazing.
How incredible that a WA-based project went national like that. So you're really quite leading the way.
Well, it wasn't hard to do that because the people in Australia realised what was going on in Chernobyl. And then the Boy Scouts came into the picture as well. They organised a camp in Western Australia for the children that weren't so sick, because they were very, very sick over there through radiation. And they brought over a few of the children from Chernobyl to have a camp with the Scouts. So at the time I was invited with my husband to come to the camp, and we went to the camp. And what we did before we went to the camp, we made up all these gift packs for the children to take back to their families in Chernobyl.
Wow.
Yeah.
So being involved with CWA like that must have taken some really great support from your husband and from your family.
Absolutely. Well, ask Sonia, my daughter, she's sitting here. And you had to have 101% support or you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was that. And another thing we did too overseas was two of our members from Albany were on holidays and they went to Mazabuka in South Africa. And the women over there were doing dressmaking under a tree, just patchwork, not patchwork, but mending and all that stuff. And these two ladies from Albany suggested that we send 2 sewing machines to Mazabuka. And I thought, how are we going to get 2 sewing machines to Mazabuka? Then I was reading an article in a paper at the hairdressers that Rotary International was sending containers of books to Zimbabwe. So I rang the district governor and said to him, can we send some 2 sewing machines?
Yeah, with you.
Some really heavy books. Yeah. Pop that in a box and pretend it's...
But they were 2 sewing machines.
Yeah.
So and he said to us, look, we're more than happy to do that, but we're not going to take that responsibility if something happens.
Yeah.
Because quite often they get to the port and they're sold off. People just take them and not nice things happen. So what we ended up doing was sending these 2 sewing machines. We put them in big boxes and we filled them up with sewing aids and parts for their machines. And off these sewing machines went. And it took 8 months for those sewing machines to arrive to where they needed to be. But the women were just ecstatic.
Oh, my goodness.
It's something they'd never receive otherwise in their lifetime.
No. So they were very happy.
So some really practical projects and applications from the CWA.
Yeah, but CWA do some wonderful things as far as internationally in Western Australia, for overseas needs.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of people think CWA are, bake sales and fabulous cakes, but it's just so much more than that,
so much more. I was talking to one of, actually, Dame Ray Rowe, her name was, she was a world president. She was Australian of the Year as well. And I said to her, why have we got that image? Mm-hmm. And she said to me, that's our hospitality image. She said, what happens if someone knocks at your door, you'll say, look, come in and have a cake or a cup of coffee or something. Yeah. And she said, don't ever lose that. So I didn't. She actually became my mentor. She was really amazing.
That's so cool.
It is good to have a woman as your mentor in that role.
Yeah.
And it is interesting you talk about how not losing that hospitality aspect of the CWA. I've got my mum's CWA cookbook.
good.
I think there's a lot of women out there that would have that
Yes.
with all the handwritten
Yeah.
notes in it and,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
that's
you know
great.
and the pages that stick together because you know that she's had it on the bench and she's been
Yes.
mixing it all up
Yeah.
and the batter's gone on it or whatever.
I got married in England, my first marriage nearly 30 years ago, and my mum came and she brought me a CWA cookbook. You've got to have one for
Yeah.
your wedding.
It's like an
I was so
iconic.
happy. Yeah.
But all my grandchildren, family, they've all got cookbooks.
Yeah.
One I gave her two. I'd forgotten she'd already had one. She said, "I've already got one of these."
The thing you can't leave home without your CWA cookbook.
Yeah,
I
and
love
this
it.
year they've rewritten it because it's our 100th anniversary. And they've written a book called The Spirit of Wisdom of Women.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you
Stop
go.
it. We better get one of those.
I think so.
Yeah, I'll get you one, Shauna.
Oh, thank you.
And there's a lot of history in that book, but also they've, updated the cookbook as well. We now have the microwave, which they never had in those days.
Of course.
True.
Yeah. And I noticed there was some recipes in there for, say, Anzac biscuits for when you didn't have eggs or,
Yes.
like there was a lot of the recipes that, as you say, were very relevant for
Yeah.
the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Supplies or stocks were low of bits and pieces.
But with our international work, we did a lot of work with the South Pacific areas because in Western Australia we're divided into different areas. It's all of Australia, New Zealand and the South Pacific area. And a few years ago I became assistant to the South Pacific president
Wow.
Yes.
Does that mean visits to the South Pacific?
Yeah, we went to the South Pacific area.
Oh,
Yeah,
lovely.
that was good.
Gee, you've really travelled the world. The CWA
I've done a
is
lot of
just-
travelling, but more travelling once I became state president. That really, I was on the road quite a bit. And I was lucky at the time, Sonia was old enough and she tells me that's where she learnt to cook when I wasn't home.
Oh, there you go. Oh, as an absent mother, you did give something valuable to your children. Survival skills.
Yeah. And the boys were married at the time.
Yeah.
Later on in life.
Yeah, yeah. So it's quite incredible to know that women, just not locally, but also statewide, nationally and internationally, are making those connections. What do you
Yes.
think it is about women that drives us to connect and support like that? Because it is quite unique, isn't it?
Well, it is, but you have to be yourself. You have to be very approachable. You have to know what the needs are in the different areas of the world and the South Pacific area. And like we've sent water tanks over to, not sent the tanks, but money for them to have water tanks, for their water overseas because the water in some areas isn't good. And even in the South Pacific area, it's not good.
Yeah. Where do you see that the needs of women in regional WA or rural communities has changed a bit over the years, or do you think it's still the same, that the CWA's role is still similar?
It's still similar, but just a bit different, Now the women can drive. And years ago, what would happen, the women would go to the CWA for a meeting and the men would go to the Farmers Union.
Yeah.
Of course they would. I thought you were going to say the pub there for a moment, Rosa.
Farmers Union in the pub.
Yeah. So it worked really well, but the men had to be very supportive of the women because there was a lot of lonely women in the rural areas and there was a lot of things that they couldn't, achieve where they were living. But nowadays it is different. Everybody drives but there's still a need out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for that
Not as
simple-
much as it was at the time, but it still is a big need. A huge need for CWA because they do just such an amazing job.
Yeah, they do, don't they? It's interesting. Now, I have to ask you this question because I have heard talk about the CWA opening themselves up to have men as associate members.
Yes.
Rosa,
that's
controversial, I've
very
heard.
controversial, and
What-
I don't want to get into all of that.
All right, she's
So
staying on the
that's
fence.
let's
Dodging
wait
the
and see what
question.
happens.
I
Yeah.
think it's something we need to see what happens because I think this is me talking.
Yeah,
Once men come into it, the men are very, very supportive of what the women do, and I think that's amazing what they do to support the women. And I think the men have got their organisations that they can be involved in, and I think the women need to be the Country Women's Association.
Well, yes.
Well, it's interesting because I've always viewed it, the CWA, as being one of those spaces where women can come to in the company of women.
Yes.
And so I think that in itself is so incredibly supportive and
true.
comforting, isn't it?
It is.
And the young women involved now, Mum.
Yeah, well, nowadays we've got these women and, we're right through the state.
So
We've got
that's interesting. Sorry, I was just going to ask about the younger women coming
women.
into it.
Yeah. We've got a group in Bunbury and there's quite a few scattered around the state. And they're all young women, like in their early 40s, and they all like to be together. They have their own agenda, but they follow what we do, you know. They're very, very supportive of what we do and we're supportive of what they do. They abide to our constitution, but they come up with things that we probably wouldn't have thought of, you know, because there's more of a need for that younger group as well.
So you still see it being a relevant organisation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Maybe not as many members, but it is relevant. Yeah.
And as you say, though, maybe just some of the ideas or the concepts or how it operates might
Will
need
be a
to
bit
just
different.
change and adjust.
Yeah, and we've got to be prepared to change with them.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think we all know the challenges of understanding the world is constantly growing and morphing, and you've either got to accept it and ride that wild pony into the, you know, into the distance, or you fall off and you get left behind.
But these women, they'll meet at night, or they may meet on a Sunday and make it a family thing, you know. But they are very interested in our agenda. But they've got things that they would like to do as well.
Yeah, okay.
So we'll, sorry, Siobhan.
No, you go.
So I can't see it not ever. I can't see CWA ever folding up because we've
it
got
just
these,
evolves with this, whoever comes through, and they, as long as the ethos is pretty much the same and it's all about support and
Friendship.
knowledge and friendship.
Yeah, support and friendship, that's the main thing.
That's really good. Really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the Darken group, some of those ladies, when we went over for the, when you were the guest speaker, they're going forward with a lot of new young women that are striving to get more involved in the areas like Mum has been in the past, more aware of the work that they can do.
So, all right. So I might ask, I'll just ask a question then. When you talk about some of the younger ones coming in and their involvement, what are they hoping to achieve, or what programs are they looking at, do you think?
Very similar programs, you know. Their aims and objectives sort of the same as what ours are, and they very similar, but they'll do it differently, you know. And I'm sure that when CWA was 100 years old, when it first started in 1924, today we're doing things a lot different to what they did, and this group now are doing things a little bit different to what we're doing, but they are doing some amazing things. They hosted the state conference last year in Gin, a whole group of young women, and they did an amazing job, but they decorated the hall and did things that we probably wouldn't have thought of, and it was just so inviting and it was a pleasure to be there. Yeah,
okay.
Because events and things these days are really immersive because it looks good, it photographs well, and that again attracts people to come and say, oh, that looks like a really interesting thing to get involved with. Let's pop down to the CWA. Did you see that flower arrangement? Did you see those cakes? Did you see the fun they were having?
Yeah.
But with these women organising the conference, they got a lot of support from their local areas.
Yeah.
You know, people outside of CWA, like you said, you know, looking at things that that looked really interested to sort of invite women to join.
That's great.
And it has to be an organisation that is inviting to join, doesn't it? And as you say, that people understand goes far beyond the bake sales. It's just so much more to it.
But they call these women the Bells groups.
Oh.
Yeah, they've got their own name.
Okay. Where's that come from?
I'm not sure. I'm not really sure.
Kind of cute.
Yeah. It must mean something. but I don't know.
No.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the CWA lives on.
The Quaramup group.
Quaramup.
The
bells, the
I think
cowbells.
it may have come through the Bells group, might have been connected with the young women down at that area. May have had something to do with it.
Yeah. Quite possibly, yeah. No, I don't know. But they haven't been going for all that long. It's just a few years.
Lovely.
Tell us about some of the very interesting women that you may have met over all these years
All
with
these,
CWA.
yeah. I've met some interesting people, some amazing people, people that I would never have thought. More so when I was state president, I met some amazing people. I got very friendly with Melena Jeffries. Remember, her husband was the governor,
Oh,
and
lovely.
because they were involved with our 75th anniversary, and we had a garden party at Government House.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, so I met her, got to know her well. Yeah, and even like I went to a World Conference in South Africa, and I met this amazing lady from Malaysia, and she's now the Queen of Malaysia.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Gee,
she was amazing, but she was on state council at the time. They don't call it state council. I'm not sure what they called it on world body, the Associated Country Women of the World, and she was very involved with that. But once she became queen, she had to give it up. And
Well, one would be busy as queen.
but last year they had a world conference in Malaysia, and she hosted the world conference.
She's like the patron.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
very similar.
fabulous.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And you must have met some quite, more of the staunch ladies, the practical ladies from
Yeah.
back in the early days as well. Because
Yeah.
like you were saying, they always used to get dressed up for
Yeah.
meetings.
Well, Dame Ray Rose, she was one of the ladies that I talked about earlier. She was amazing. She was a world president. I met her and had a lot to do with her. She became my mentor. I'd ring her, and it didn't matter what time I'd ring her, she was always there. But there were some amazing women that had a lot of knowledge that I learnt from. And
And a lot of the past state presidents too, like Margaret Sullivan, and
yeah,
a lot of the women may not have had a professional sense behind them, but they were local women from different areas that did amazing stuff.
they did. Yeah. Like Margaret Sullivan, she was the president of the South Pacific area, and she did some amazing stuff over there as well. But trying to think of other women that I've met some amazing women and men, as well.
And sharing the knowledge, that's what's so important,
That's
isn't it?
so important. And when you've got that same common ideals, interests and that, you sort of come away thinking, wow, and you hang on to that.
It's empowering, isn't it?
Yes, empowering women out there.
Lovely.
You'll see them come up at conferences and you think, God, where'd they get that from,
Yeah.
But another thing I enjoyed doing in South Africa, in Pretoria, I was state president at the time, and the national president couldn't go to the World Conference, so I delivered all the welcomes from Australia to the conference. And fortunately, I was the first speaker up, because I would have died if I had been the last speaker listening to the others. But I just got up and I was just myself, and I talked about the greetings that we had from the Prime Minister and all the heads of states. They all gave me a letter to read out, and that was very special.
Oh, no big deal. Wow, that's
and then
huge.
I sprained my ankles 2 days later.
And you need to remember as well, what was your involvement with the Olympics at one point as well?
Yeah, that was amazing as well. What happened was I had a phone call to say that I've been selected to carry the torch in Brunswick, and I must have had some nominations. People had nominated me to be a torchbearer, and at the time I couldn't do it because I said, look, I'm sorry, I can't do this because I'll be at a conference in Canberra. And this woman said to me, you'd be the only one that says they can't do it.
I was just going to say, the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
And she said, just leave it with me. So she rang back 5 minutes later and said, where will you be the next day? And I said, I'll be back in Western Australia. So she said, great. So I carried the torch in, I forget where it was now. Not Wanneroo, Joondalup.
Oh, you
Yeah,
got
so-
to do it. That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
so I did get to do it. I got off the plane late at night and was out first thing next morning. Carried the torch through Joondalup, and that was very special.
Yeah.
And a lot of CWA ladies were there, and they'd organised a breakfast because it was a morning. And we all had breakfast together, and all my family were there, and my grandkids got hold of
That's
my torch
beautiful.
and did their own relay around an oval because I was finished in a park.
Was it heavy?
I've still got it.
Oh, fabulous.
You were able to buy your torch if you wanted to, so I chose to buy mine.
Have you ever had moments where you've just thought to yourself, oh my goodness, how did I get here?
Well, my whole life's been a challenge. And, it has. There's been moments I'm thinking, what am I doing here, you know? Like this morning when I was asked to do this podcast, I thought, oh, gee, I don't think I could do that.
And look at you now, Rosa, chatting
And
away.
it's not hard. Yeah. I think you've got to, everyone has a challenge. You've got to be challenged in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Embrace the opportunities, so to speak, isn't
Yeah,
it?
because it might only come once.
Yeah. So do you think that's pretty much been your ethos, certainly in your involvement with CWA, is just to step forward and take it on?
Well, I think everyone's has a responsibility in their own area. When you live in a country area, you have a responsibility to stand tall in that area, to do what you can do for the community, and that's been my challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, goodness me. And do you think that that is something that in modern times, and I'm not at all meaning that you're old, Rosa, from, the old times, but I mean in this current day and age, do you think that sometimes we lose that connection or that touch of being connected, of standing up within your local community? Or do you think that there's people still coming through now?
No, I think there's still people coming through. Maybe not as much, but no, I think they're still coming through. There's a lot of voluntary work out there in the communities and the country areas, and everyone works together and pulls together and, achieves things in their own community.
It's one of the things I think about regional communities and why they continue is because there is a lot of volunteer.
Yeah.
People realise that they do have to give their time, don't they?
And CWA is all volunteer. You don't get paid for anything you do, and you don't expect it as well. But it's a wonderful organisation of volunteering of women in the country areas.
So a bright future for the CWA.
Great. Yeah, I think we've got a great future. I can't see it not ever going any, sort of going backwards. I think we're
fantastic.
and with the young ones coming up, we'll go forward.
Come on, young ones, step up
Yes.
into the breach.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. They might have to get off their phones though. Is that unkind, Rosa?
No, it's true.
I think you need your phones.
Yeah.
And the whole time I was state president, I never had a mobile phone because it just sort of came into vogue at the time. But I'd always ring John to say I'm leaving the office, or because I had my own office in Perth.
The old landline for those those listening who aren't unaccustomed to understanding that.
Yeah. But nowadays it's all on the phone, isn't it?
Wow, I often wonder how the world existed before mobile phones and Google came along. How did we know anything or
We
reach?
did, though. We knew when to be where we had to be and who was going to be there, and if we were late, we were late, or whatever.
Yeah,
Everyone,
that's right.
we figured it out, Sid, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, we certainly did figure it out.
Yeah.
So, Rosa, do you have a quote, or is there something that women need to hear once in their lifetime or a few times in their lifetime?
Well, I've got this. I wrote this down because I knew I may forget. But, I've taken a very keen interest in rural and remote areas of Western Australia. And my belief is that everyone has a responsibility and a role to play who belongs in a community to ensure the future and welfare of your town. And the degree of success will depend on you. Enthusiasm is the key, not only to the achievements of great things, but to the accomplishment of anything that is worthwhile. And I believe you need to stand tall in your communities, to be proud proud of what you are doing and support each other to achieve individual and combined goals.
Perfect.
Beautiful
Yeah,
sentiments.
absolutely.
And tell me, what is something that you might have said to your daughter, your grandchildren, about being a woman? What do you think is something special that we should always hold to ourselves as being women in the world?
Sonia might be able to answer that, but I think I think you've got to be a good example, and it's your children, your family will learn from your examples.
Yeah, that's true.
Great sentiments, Rosa.
That's right. Yeah.
So true. Love it.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode, then please consider subscribing, putting on notifications, and we will leave links below if you want to learn more about what we discussed in this conversation.
More about the CWA.
Yes.
I love it. Thanks, Rosa, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, and it's been a pleasure.
And always remember,
Every day.
You are remarkable.